crime took place in Green Bay, a city in the U.S. state of Wisconsin, located on the shore of Lake Michigan. With a population of around 104,000 people, it is the third largest city in the state. Known for its strong football culture, Green Bay is home to the Green Bay Packers, one of the most successful teams in the National Football League. The city has a diverse economy, with industries including healthcare, education, manufacturing, and tourism. Visitors to Green Bay can explore attractions such as the National Railroad Museum, Bay Beach Amusement Park, and the historic downtown district. It was here in Green Bay that a tragic murder took place in 1986. On April 18, 1964, a bright-eyed baby girl was born. Her name was Lisa Holstead. Raised by a strong, resilient single mother named Judith Karen Pearl Thompson, Lisa's childhood was not without its challenges. Her father, Frank Holstead, was absent from her life, but that didn't stop Lisa from shining bright. From an early age, she exhibited a curious mind and a creative spirit that defined her life. She grew up with two loving older sisters, Deborah, who was 3 years older, and Susan, who was 2 years older than Lisa. They were always there for her, to lend a listening ear or as a shoulder to cry on. Lisa felt a sense of security and warmth with them that could not be easily replicated. Her older brother, Stephen Holstead, who was 5 years older than her, was her protector and always looked out for his little sister and made sure she felt safe and loved. Despite the financial struggles of being raised by a single mother, their love for each other was unwavering. Judith worked tirelessly to provide for her children, and her love for them knew no bounds. Lisa Holstead had a passion for horseback riding and was also artistic and sketched during her spare time. However, her life took an unexpected turn when she got pregnant at the age of 17 and gave birth to her beloved son, Jeremy, in 1981. Despite the challenges she faced, Lisa was a loving and devoted mother who doted on her son. She worked tirelessly to ensure that Jeremy had the best life possible. Her kind, outgoing, and creative personality shone through as she raised Jeremy on her own, just like her own mother had raised her and her siblings. Lisa Holstead was a woman of courage and independence. Despite the comfort of living with her family, she yearned for something more. So, she made the brave decision to move across the country to Los Angeles to pursue her dreams in 1981. After some time, she realized that what she truly wanted was a stable and peaceful life for her and her son, Jeremy. She found that in the town of Green Bay in Wisconsin, where they settled and made a home in 1982. While she never attended college, Lisa was determined to continue her education and took a goal-oriented, non-credit adult learning course at the Northeastern Wisconsin Technical Institute between 1983 and 1984. By the time she returned to Green Bay in 1986, Lisa was only 22 years old, but she had already accomplished so much. With her son by her side, who was now 5 years old, she was ready to take on whatever challenges came her way in this new chapter of their lives. She had even found love again with a man named John Sott, with whom she shared a cozy home in Green Bay. The couple enjoyed simple pleasures like fishing and playing darts together, and even had a quirky collection of pets, an eel and a bird named Herbie. Lisa's love for her family and her zest for life were evident in everything she did, and she cherished every moment spent with her loved ones. However, fate had a cruel twist in store for her, and her bright future was tragically cut short. On August 12, 1986, the moon was high in the sky in Wisconsin as Lisa and John embarked on a late-night adventure. Lisa and John seemed to be having a great time, their competitive spirits shining through as they played game after game of darts. But as that night came to a close, tension began to rise, and the alcohol seemed to take its toll. When they were driving back home, the car came to a stop at the intersection of Mason and Taylor Street at 2:30 a.m. Lisa and John had been having an argument, and she opened the door and stepped out in the cool night air. The argument with John had left her feeling frustrated and upset, and she needed to clear her head. She told John that she would walk home and that he could go ahead and get some rest. He hoped that she would come back soon and that they could make up and put this argument behind them. As the hours passed and the sun began to rise over the quiet town of Green Bay, John's worry grew into a gnawing sense of dread. Lisa still hadn't returned, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He scoured the streets and alleys, calling out her name, but there was no response. Desperately, he made his way to the police station and reported her missing, and his heart was heavy with fear and uncertainty. After just an hour of John reporting her missing, a gruesome discovery was made by two unsuspecting workers in the Kenyors Nature Park. It was an ordinary day for the workers as they made their way along the riverbank. Something caught their eye, a hand jutting out from the water's surface. Intrigued, they pulled their truck to a stop and approached the water's edge. What they found there would haunt them forever. The lifeless body of a woman lying partially unclothed, as if she had been cast aside like an unwanted object. They immediately called the authorities, and within minutes, the officers from the Green Bay Police Department arrived at the scene and were met with a gruesome sight. The unknown woman's lifeless body lay in the marsh, surrounded by tall reeds and murky water. The detectives tried to secure the area to gather any evidence. As the detectives combed through the marsh in search of any clues that could lead them to the woman's identity, they stumbled upon a small piece of fabric poking out from under the murky waters. With a sense of urgency, they waded through the marsh to retrieve the fabric, and upon closer inspection, they discovered an identity card hidden in the back pocket of a pair of jeans. It was then that they were able to confirm the victim's identity as Lisa Holstead. When they approached her body, they saw the telltale marks on her neck, grim evidence that she had been strangled to death, and the case was ruled as a homicide. The autopsy report delivered a gruesome account of Lisa's final moments. Her blood alcohol level was found to be sky-high, clocking in at a staggering 0.25%, well beyond the legal limit at that time. The autopsy further revealed that she had suffered from multiple wounds that left her body streaked with blood, a sight that could haunt even the bravest of souls. Worse still, the medical examiner's findings pointed to a heinous sexual assault as the primary cause of her death. The only hope they had was the foreign DNA sample that they had managed to extract from the victim's body. The discovery of the DNA was like finding a needle in a haystack for the police. They knew it was a crucial piece of evidence, but they didn't have a suspect to match it to. The tiny sample was carefully stored away like a precious gemstone. The detectives hoped that someday, technology would catch up to the potential of this evidence and give them the answers they desperately sought. The news of Lisa's death spread like wildfire, leaving a trail of grief in its wake. Her boyfriend John was shattered by the loss of the woman he loved, racked with guilt for the final argument, and haunted by the fact that he could have done more to keep her safe. Her family was plunged into a world of pain and confusion. The police moved swiftly to investigate, interviewing everyone who might have had a motive to harm Lisa. Detectives followed up on every lead, questioned every suspect, and revisited the crime scene numerous times in the years that followed. But nothing seemed to break the case wide open. They even went back to the drawing board numerous times, piecing together any possible lead or hint that could lead to the identity of Lisa's killer. But their efforts were met with dead ends. The passage of time only seemed to add another layer of obscurity to the case. Evidence deteriorated and potential suspects slipped out of sight. The case was eventually archived and sat gathering dust on a shelf for over 30 years. But in 2020, after 34 years of the case lying cold, hope again flickered as Detective David Graff from the GBPD reopened the case and took the lead in the investigation. With dogged determination, he and his team combed through the old case files, and their eyes fell upon a small vial, forgotten in the back of the storage unit. Inside was the key to unlocking the case, the DNA of the perpetrator. It was time to bring in the latest forensic technology behind her brutal murder. He reached out to a pioneer in the space, a company specializing in forensic genetic genealogy, hoping to unlock the secrets of the killer's identity. This cutting-edge technology would not only reveal more about the suspect, but also provide a fascinating insight into the killer's familial connections. With this new knowledge, the detective was finally able to unravel the twisted web of this cold case. The DNA was sent for analysis in June 2020, and when the results came back from the lab, the Green Bay Police Department found themselves with a wealth of information about their suspect. With every bit of information gleaned from the DNA analysis, the police were one step closer to the killer. The police started carefully tracing the family trees of distant relatives of the person. Piece by piece, they constructed a web of connections until they had built 10 to 15 different family trees. As the investigation progressed, they scoured databases and websites to find groups of people who could potentially be related to the victim. After much investigation and digging, they stumbled upon a group of individuals living in other states. Following their trail, they found a connection to Wisconsin, and finally, the trail led them to Green Bay, the very place where the brutal murder took place. The police found a family member who had been living in Green Bay in 1986, the same year the crime was committed. Finally, after countless hours of work, they found a suspect whose DNA potentially matched the sample taken at the crime scene. The long-awaited breakthrough had come at last. The man was Luke Griffin, and investigators found that Luke already had a history of violence against women, including strangulation, and had been released on parole from the Green Bay Correctional Institution, where he had been serving time for the heinous crime of second-degree sexual assault. What shocked them the most was that Luke had a previous conviction for sexual assault in 1981, a fact that had gone unnoticed during the initial investigation. It seemed that the police had missed a vital clue that had been right in front of them all this time. However, thanks to the groundbreaking technology of forensic genetic genealogy and the tireless work of Detective David Graff and his team, Luke's past finally caught up with him. With a suspect in their sights, the investigators knew they had to be absolutely certain before making an arrest. They needed to test Luke Griffin's DNA against the profile from the crime scene. So, in September 2020, the police embarked on a thrilling mission to track down their prime suspect, Luke Griffin, who had moved to the city of Racine. The Green Bay detectives joined forces with the Racine County authorities, the FBI, and DCI to put Griffin under surveillance, hoping to uncover evidence against him. The hunt was on for Luke, and the authorities were not going to let him out of their sights. They trailed him to another town in Wisconsin, watching his every move. On September 18, 2020, while they were watching him, they saw him disposing of some beer cans in a dumpster and carelessly tossing a cigarette butt on the ground. Little did he know that these seemingly insignificant acts would lead to his undoing. The discarded items were quickly collected by the police and sent back to the lab for further DNA testing. The results came back on September 29, 2020, and the authorities were ecstatic. The DNA was a perfect match to that found at the crime scene over 3 decades ago. On October 28, 2020, at around 6 a.m., there was the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. As Luke was escorted out of his home, neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, whispering amongst themselves as the police car drove away with Luke to Brown County Jail. In the interrogation room, Luke sat stone-faced as he denied any involvement in the murder. When the questioning intensified, Luke's resolve began to waver, and he finally confessed to having a sexual encounter with the victim. But he claimed that his memory of that night was hazy at best, citing intoxication with drugs and alcohol as the reason for his confusion. As the details of the crime unfolded, it became clear that Luke's intoxication had clouded his memory, and he was unable to recall the events that led to Lisa's death. The once elusive suspect was now in custody. In 2021, it was time for his trial. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members of the victim, and curious onlookers as Luke Griffin entered flanked by guards. All eyes were on him as he took his seat at the defendant's table. Luke's fate hung in the balance as the trial began, and the prosecution presented their evidence. The jury listened intently, absorbing every detail of the case. Luke recounted the events of that fateful night in 1986 and told the jury that he had simply stopped at McDonald's and then taken a route that happened to pass by the spot where Lisa's body was later discovered. But with every word he spoke, the weight of the crime he committed seemed to hang heavier on his shoulders. As the trial went on, the evidence against him continued to mount, until finally the jury was left with no choice but to make a decision. And Luke was booked on a first-degree homicide charge, and his bail was set at $1 million. After a long and grueling legal battle, on January 27, 2023, Luke made a dramatic decision to plead no contest to the charge of homicide by reckless conduct. Again, the courtroom was tense as the judge read out the verdict, and Peter Hain, one of Luke's attorneys, argued for a more lenient sentence, citing Luke's poor health and the 2 years he had already spent in jail. However, Judge Timothy Hinkfuss was unmoved by Hain's request, stating that Luke's lack of accountability and failure to take responsibility had only continued to victimize Holstead's family. Hinkfuss went on to explain that the sentence he was able to give was limited by the laws in place at the time of the crime, and that current Wisconsin law only allows for a maximum of 40 years for homicide by reckless conduct, a Class C felony. There was a collective gasp from the crowd as Luke was found guilty of the crime and was charged with first-degree intentional homicide. It was a bittersweet victory for the prosecution, who had worked tirelessly to bring justice for their victim's family. On March 27, 2023, 67-year-old Luke Griffin was sentenced to 10 years in prison, the maximum penalty available under the law in 1986. Under the old sentencing law, Luke can be released after serving 2/3 of his sentence. He was also granted 2.5 years of time served, which means he could be released in 4.5 years and is eligible for parole in less than 6 months. The legal battle surrounding the case had been intensely fought since 2020, according to the Brown County Circuit Court Judge Timothy Hinkfuss. When delivering the sentence, Judge Hinkfuss acknowledged that Lisa Holstead's murder was a despicable and heinous act, but was constrained by the laws in effect at the time of the crime. Despite acknowledging the maximum sentence was woefully inadequate, Brown County District Attorney David Lassie called for it to be imposed, citing the severity of the crime and its impact on the victim's family. He failed to take accountability and avoided justice for 34 years. Lassie said, "The impact that has had on the family is significant. The family members' emotional impact was evident through the hearing, and they made it clear that no sentence could bring back their beloved Lisa." The courtroom was filled with emotion when 5 of Holstead's family members stood before the judge to deliver their witness statements. Their voices trembled with grief and anger when they recounted the pain and trauma they had endured for over 3 decades. One sister, a brother, a niece, a son, and a granddaughter all spoke passionately, sharing the impact the long, cold case had on their family. They described the void left by their beloved sister, mother, and grandmother, and expressed their disappointment with the maximum sentence available. Stephen Holstead's, Lisa's brother's voice was thick with emotion as he addressed the man who had caused his family so much pain. "The pain it caused our family cannot even be described to you," he said, his eyes fixed on Luke. "Many tears. I have thought about Lisa all these years. Every day. It's been 13,377 days since you murdered her." They painted a picture of a kind and loving woman, a devoted mother to her young son. The family spoke of Lisa's creative spirit, her love for art and music, and her trusting and outgoing nature. They shared that they had few photos of Lisa and no videos, but one family member brought a framed picture of her to the stand, and another played an audio recording of her singing as a child. The case of Lisa Holstead is a testament to the power of perseverance and the remarkable advances in forensic technology that have been made in recent years. While it may have seemed like an unsolvable mystery for decades, the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the use of cutting-edge forensic techniques ultimately led to justice being served. What sentence do you think Luke deserves for his crime? On Sunday, September 15, 2019, 2 fishermen were engaged in their daily work near the aqueduct, the Neuquén province's breakwaters in Argentina. The Lime River was approached by them on the same day. They remained composed until they witnessed something that was beyond their understanding. When the water floated the remains of a young girl's body, specifically limbs and a skull. Frustrated, the fishermen contacted authorities who quickly arrived at the scene. Laura Lopez, a young girl from Plodio, was quickly recalled by officers. Had been missing for less than 3 days. Her physical form was not familiar. The police were unsure of her identity and continued their search in the area to discover any indications of the victim's identity. In the same river, they came across a torn-up fabric bag, tights, and shoes undergarments. It was evident that the girl had been a victim of sexual assault, not just murder. Police contacted Laura's relatives after finding the clothing and inquired if they knew about it, would be able to spot it. The officers were unaware that the investigation would uncover the truth about the case. The method used to commit the crime was even more gruesome than what had been initially suspected. Plodio, Argentina, was the birthplace of Laura Lopez on November 11, 2000. Her elder sisters, Melissa and Damaris, who were 18 years old when she was born, loved her from the first day. Laura's mother passed away when she was only 3 years old, and all 3 siblings were left as orphans under the care of their father. Despite his initial efforts to provide for the family, the father eventually became addicted to alcoholism a few years later. Despite the challenges she faced, Laura was known for her sweet and loving nature. That's why her sister began referring to her as Cielo, a nickname that everyone who knew her would call her. She was referred to by her. The girl's father was laid off years later, necessitating them to find more work. At 18 years old, Cielo began vending fried pastries during the day. She went to high school in the evening, and during her free time from studying, she spent doing something else. Ensure the well-being of her nieces and nephews. At the onset of her schooling, she had aspirations of finding a good job to restore her financial stability. A sense of stability has been bestowed upon her family. Unluckily, something took place that prevented this from happening. Cielo and Damaris spent the entire day on September 12, 2019, drinking tea with each other. Damaris finished renovating the house. Her sister joked that she had never made tea like her before. Either way, it's a good thing. It was a pleasant day. Cielo later attended school, where her peers observed something sporadic about the routine. She chose to sit at the back of the class instead of her usual spot and left after 20 minutes, the conclusion of the lesson. A friend greeted Cielo as he returned home at approximately 11:30 p.m. They spent some time conversing, drinking a few drinks and taking selfies for social media. At 3 a.m., They said their goodbyes and Cielo admitted to feeling tired but having a plan for the future, to go to sleep. A message was sent by Melissa to Lisa the next day, inquiring if she had sought medical attention for her ear issues. She was unresponsive, anxious. Melissa contacted Demaris to inquire about Cielo's presence, which led to concern. The sisters of Cielo. She was nowhere to be found and her phone was switched off. They contacted the police as they found no evidence of her presence for several hours. They were informed at the police station that they had to wait for 48 hours from the last news item. Cielo was last seen by them before they filed a missing person report. The officer speculated that she might have had a boyfriend, as it was believed to be common. Adolescents encountering a situation. Saturday was characterized by the absence of life to Cielo. The report was only accepted by the police at that point, leading to a search. Sadly, it was already too late. The Lemay River's breakwater area was the location where two fishermen were working on Sunday the 15th. Cloutier is just 15 kilometers away from where Cielo calls home. They remained composed until they encountered something that caught their attention. A young girl's body, including limbs and a skull, was said to be found floating in the water. They promptly informed the authorities about this. Upon arrival, the officers observed that the brutality had been extinguished with great force. The body is the subject of discussion. It was apparent that the person in question had a thorough understanding of knives. The search for clues in the area was ongoing, with detectives still searching for any leads. The individual affected, a fabric bag, leggings, and underwear were discovered in the same river, but completely destroyed. They came across 2 rings while conducting their search. Finally, officers searched the riverbed and found a blood-stained knife. Cielo's family was soon referred to by them. Damaris spotted the attire upon her arrival at the location, and without hesitation, she took action. Without hesitation, she confirmed that it was her sister's property. The fishermen discovered Laura Lopez's limbs and skull in the shallow waters downstream from where they accidentally found her. The discovery of a young woman's body in Lemay River was made by firefighters around 11:30 on Monday. It had already been entrusted to the Forensic Expert Corps for examination. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Carlos Scordillo. He ascertained that the death was caused by a severe blow to the head, leading to internal bleeding, a throbbing of the brain. A blow to the back of her head caused her to become unconscious. Cielo endured 2 to 4 hours of agony. She could have survived if she had been treated properly. Furthermore, her arms were found to have bruises, indicating that she had been beaten and had some facial trauma. Struggled her way towards the attacker. Cielo's sister's fears were validated by the forensic expert. The discovery of intimate wounds on her body was a clear indication of sexual assault. He also said that the recognizable marks of cuts on her neck, arms, and legs mentioned that the culprit had a history of approaching on kitchen knives. The assailant's lack of medical or anatomical knowledge was emphasized, which further intensified the problem. The roster of suspects. The detectives were unaware of the individual accountable for this terrible crime. After 3:00 a.m. on Friday, they analyzed Cielo's mobile phone and discovered that it was lost. Her contact had been with a man named Alfredo Emilio Escobar, a mechanic by profession, was 28 years old. He and Cielo were both students in high school, and he had a passion for hunting and fishing, inspiringly enabling him to wield a knife. The distance between the girl's home and his house was 2.5 kilometers and/or 20 blocks, which made it convenient. The reception of signals from the antennas is potent. The girl was contacted by this person 4 times on September 13th at 3:16, 3:22, and 3:36 a.m. The man. At that point, the antennas established that they were both at home. Then both mobiles were activated in the vicinity of the girl's abode. The phone of Cielo headed towards the city center and arrived at Escobar's residence by 5 a.m. The girl's WhatsApp story featured an alien emoji and her phone was still being tracked down. The man's dwelling was where I found him. At 5:52 a.m., the girl's mobile phone ceased to function. There was no communication from her thereafter. The records also indicated that Escobar had not re-entered his cell phone until 11:05 p.m. the following day. A day that, in China Muerta, where Cielo was hiding, the antenna of a nearby telephone pole detected the phone during this time. Subsequently, the remains were uncovered. Escobar came back home at 12:05 p.m. on September 15th. The video was captured by 13 cameras, which cover both city cameras and private residences. The stores were also examined. Two individuals whose names were revealed were shown in specific recordings from the early morning of September 13th. The physical features were reminiscent of those of Cielo and Escobar. The young girl's mobile phone was in a state of mobility at the same time. Escobar was the only suspect in this case without a doubt. This man was recognized by one of the agents during the investigation. He reminisced about encountering him on Highway 22 a year ago, which was the way they were crossing to meet up with their families, the towns of New Cane and Plody. A patrol car was hit by a young man who had been driving at velocities of over 80 kilometers per hour. The hour is a crucial one. He refused to be arrested, and a lawsuit was brought against him. Escobar was on the brink of going to court for that incident, but now the charges were completely different. The situation is distinct and has a greater gravity. At 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, a police patrol was present at the scene, which was roughly 30 meters away from Escobar's residence, had been working diligently. A young man who looked like the suspect was spotted driving away from a Fiat Ducato minibus that they had observed. Exited. He was immediately recognized by the police based on his physical attributes, including his face shape, facial features, and hairstyle. He entered the house and later emerged with two adults around 60 years old. The trio got into a vehicle heading towards Highway 22 without any suspicion. Police chased the vehicle for a while and found it stopped in an area of nowhere. The zone is situated roughly 30 meters away from a bridge that connects New Cane and Cipolletti. The elderly man and Escobar exited the vehicle simultaneously. The police proceeded to ask for identification. Escobar was accompanied by his father and another man while his mother was in the car. It was evident that they were attempting to escape the city. The young man did not hesitate to undergo the procedure, but was visibly anxious. Shortly after, Escobar was brought to the police station and his vehicle was seized. Following that, he was subjected to a medical examination. The examination revealed swollen areas on the knuckles of his right hand's fingers, consistent with the use of a punching hand. He sustained cuts and bruises on the palm of his right hand. Cielo's death occurred on the same day as a few days before. These findings led to Escobar being charged with the rape and murder of the girl. Despite his request to remain silent, he was detained in custody for 6 months. There was a fear that he might escape or interfere with the investigation. On September 1st, the first search warrant was issued at the Estrada Street residence, the location where the Escobar family made their home. The property was sizable, incorporating a construction site and 2 buildings in the back. Upon entering the sleeping area where Escobar was present, officers discovered fingerprints on the walls. The use of luminol to check them resulted in the discovery of bloodstains. A cloth stained with blood was also found by officers during the search. The situation worsened as they walked to the building that was behind the residence. Crumpled vegetation was found to have blood spots. Blood was also present on the gates, the right handle of a cart, and on one end of an infrared emitting device. A device. It was in this place that the blow that caused Cielo's death occurred, as could be seen. The search team found blood stains at the location and then examined samples for comparison. The blood of the girl in Escobar was present. The fluid found on Cielo's body was also examined through DNA analysis. The lawyer representing Escobar stated that rape charges should not be brought up until the outcome is determined. We were seized. Nonetheless, the outcomes were achieved in a short time frame. The Ministry of Health Central Laboratory scrutinized the samples collected during the outbreak. The victim and accused genetic profiles are matched in the search. At the time of his arrest, Escobar was wearing sneakers and a knife was discovered at the river's bottom. They were also examined. Cielo was found to have DNA matching on both items. The victim's genital area was examined using 3 swabs. Escobar's DNA was compatible with one of them. As a result, investigators could already be certain that this individual had sexually assaulted the victim. The girl was killed, dismembered, and disposed of the corpse. The confirmation was made by law enforcement officials during a press conference on September 21st. Prosecutor Juan Agustin Garcia said he believed Escobar was guilty of the crime. He accused Cielo of murdering him to cover up his rape and stated that he could be prosecuted in the event of a guilty verdict, could be sentenced to life in prison. Similar to this, more evidence was still required. Technology played a significant role in Escobar's discovery. Even though he did not plead guilty, the court ordered the seizure of his mobile phone, and he was required to furnish the access code. Scrutiny. Despite having Cielo as one of his contacts, it was discovered that he had removed her from the conversation on the night, the disappearance of her. The victim's call history was deleted by him, but their social security number was not removed. Dialogues with the media, the suspects' actions on September 11th, 12, and 13 were also revealed during the investigation. Visited the social media site to check out pictures shared by Cielo. Escobar maintained his innocence despite the evidence against him. Nevertheless, the evidence indicated that he was accountable for the murder. Ultimately, a conclusion was reached concerning the events that transpired on the night of the crime. On September 12, 2019, Cielo departed from school at approximately 8 p.m. After spending time with a friend, she stated that she was tired and would go to sleep. Sleeping is the purpose of this. She was contacted by Escobar at 3:40 in the morning, and they started a conversation. She and Kim were not friends, but she agreed to meet him, and they went back to his house. The events that occurred inside the house remained unanswered. Nonetheless, the research indicates that Cielo refrained from having personal encounters with Escobar. In a fit of rage, he sexually assaulted her. He took his own life out of fear that she might report him to the authorities. He escorted her to the backyard, hitting her on the head twice. Cielo was alive at that point, and Escobar acted cruelly by hiding her body for several hours. In order to avoid being caught unawares, he also shut down his phone. Cielo's body had been lying in the shed for almost a day, and she passed away due to the injuries. The body was dismembered with a sharp knife that Escobar had hidden in his kitchen. He loaded the body parts into his Fiat Ducato minibus and drove for 15 kilometers to reach his destination, the area where the breakwaters are located. He came back to the location and turned on his phone, feeling relieved and contemplating. The conclusion was reached. This case has become a public concern for the entire city. Nukin has strongly denounced the accused. The statement made by Escobar's younger sister, who is 23 years old, was the most powerful. She posted a message on her social media profile that addressed both her brother and the victim. The publication was met with a range of responses. Some people sympathized with her situation, while others accused her of complicity. In the midst of these assaults, they requested that Cielo and her team remain attentive. Her family is a part of it. Melissa subsequently got in touch with Escobar's sister, expressed her gratitude for the message, and requested an explanation. It's time for people to cease attacking the girl since she has no history of harm. The criminal case was immediately pursued by the prosecution. The initial court proceedings were conducted in the Provincial Legislative Assembly. According to the Nukin prosecutor, Escobar was fully responsible for his actions. The girl was allegedly killed through gender-based violence, in addition to other charges, the act of rape. In the same hearing, professionals who were involved in the examination of the attire discovered in that case. The River, in conjunction with the remains and evidence found in the man's house, provided their testimonies. Florencia, Cielo's closest friend, was the most unexpected. She stated that Escobar had been sending messages to the victim for several months, inviting her to join him, to socialize and enjoy a drink. Despite this, they had never met before. She stated that she had been acquainted with him for 5 years and was aware that he didn't have it, a highly commendable standing. Parties at Escobar's house had been a regular occurrence over the years. The house was strewn with alcohol and psychoactive substances. Intimate liaisons were openly shared by couples. According to Florencia, she had advised her friend against dating Escobar on multiple occasions. The girl consistently replied with a refusal to respond and an inability to reply to his messages. The defense questioned why she had not suggested blocking Escobar's number. In response, Florencia stated that her friend had made the decision and she didn't want to dictate anything. Her life. They exhibited the girl's surveillance camera footage while she was on the stand. The day that Cielo went missing, they exhibited her a recording from IR at 4:00 a.m., which showed 2 individuals standing on opposite sides of the screen, individuals heading towards the central district of the city. Florencia reluctantly acknowledged that it was Cielo. She affirmed that her sneakers, jacket, and walking style were unmistakable. The girl also recognized Escobar. The testimony of Escobar's friend exposed his impulsiveness, as the judge accused him of infidelity. His behavior was marked by substance abuse and womanizing tendencies. His ex-partner was also present in court. According to her, their relationship ended in a negative way many years ago. She reported him to the authorities as she believed he had burglarized her home and stolen money. When she reached out to him to ask for the money back, he ran after her friend who was with her. The defendant attempted to defend himself after examining the testimonies. Escobar pointed to his friend, who sold him illegal substances, as the actual offender. The offense committed, That night I was in a state of unconsciousness. My admission is that I have committed the act of removing blood and discarding it. He stated to the local media that he had not committed murder. According to him, he was intoxicated that evening, and this individual was also under the influence of drugs in his residence with Cielo. After hearing a scream from one of the rooms, Escobar immediately went to investigate what had taken place. The blood was visible and he proceeded to clean it up. He aided his friend in disguising the body. He expressed gratitude towards them for allowing him to share his supposed story at the end. The truth is what matters most. Despite the lack of evidence, this statement was not validated. Escobar was the lone suspect. He stated in his closing argument that this man exploited the fact that they betrayed the victim's trust by being somewhat familiar with her. He orchestrated the cruelness of his behavior and the gruesome method of disposing of the remains. Alfredo Emilio Escobar received a unanimous verdict after the jury deliberated for only 40 minutes. Convicted of raping and murdering Laura Cielo Lopez, aged 18. The charge that the latter one was brought up was made worse because it was aimed at hiding the attack. The issue of gender violence was a part of it. Due to these reasons, he was given a life sentence with no chance of release. The Cielo Lopez law, which was passed by the Neuquén provincial government, has been in effect since then. Strive to eradicate violence against women. All ages, including students and teachers, are required to receive training on gender violence. Fortunately, he was not forgotten, and a life sentence is reassuring. The victim cannot be brought back to life by involving society and the family, as per Marcelo Henriques, the family's lawyer in Velasco. Dallas, a modern city with a cosmopolitan spirit and southern charm, is widely known for its skyscrapers, upscale shopping, restaurants, and rich cultural life. It has many historic districts such as the West End with its late 19th century buildings and futuristic landmarks, shimmering glass towers and skyscraper spires that serve as the city's main landmarks. Dallas is a city where modern metropolitan life is infused with natural beauty. There are more than 30 parks in different parts of the city. The Gable Park residential complex is located at the center of Dallas Cheek. Living here itself offers a vibrant, exclusive lifestyle and exquisite unique experiences. The high-rise building is elegant in appearance, has a parking garage and concierge. It is a vibrant and luxurious apartment building with a landscaped saltwater pool, fitness studio, and gourmet coffee bar in uptown Dallas. It's a quiet and safe place with no crowds of tourists or neighborhood residents strolling by. On September 2, 2015, at 7:42 p.m., a car entered the Gable Park parking lot. The car parked, and a beautiful young woman got out. She had a shopping bag in her hands. She slammed the door shut, stepped away from the car, and a minute later, 2 gunshots rang out. With the business completed, the dark figure quickly jumped into a black Jeep Cherokee that pulled up and fled the apartment complex. Local resident Hashim Saad, who was walking to the parking lot to pick up his car, saw the injured woman and called the emergency services. Officers arrived at the scene of the tragedy and found the injured woman. Unfortunately, she was already dead. The victim turned out to be 35-year-old Kendra Hatcher. Kendra K. Hatcher was born February 3, 1980, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Colley in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois. Her parents divorced and her mother married Bruce Jameson. She was not an only child. She had 3 sisters, Jamie Kaufman, Ashley Lipscomb, Melissa Jameson, and 1 brother, Neil Hatcher. She grew up in Pleasant Plains and studied dentistry there. After her divorce in 2010, she moved to Dallas where she began working at Smilazona Dental Studio. Kendra had a strong Christy and faith and wanted to use her dental skills to help others. For example, the clinic provided services to disadvantaged children completely free of charge. In her spare time, Kendra taught Bible studies and participated in volunteer programs that included building churches overseas and providing free dental services to children in Ecuador. Dallas was welcoming to the young professional. Kendra's professional life quickly gained momentum and her personal life flourished as well. On May 24, 2015, Kendra began dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua. Kendra and Ricardo met through a dating app, and from their first date, they were inseparable. They both had similar values, interests, and wanted the same things in life. Ricardo was finishing his residency in dermatology at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, and even though they had only been in a relationship for a few months, the young men were already discussing their upcoming marriage. However, an incident in a parking lot took the life of his beloved woman and cut short all future plans. Investigators who arrived at the scene of the massacre examined the crime scene and put forward the version of robbery as Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. Bullet fragments and a gun magazine were found on the ground next to her body. However, the manner of shooting and the traces of the gunshot pushed the robbery version to the background. One bullet struck the woman in the back and the other in the head. The entry wound from the bullet was at the top of the head and it exited through the chin, indicating that Kendra had her hands up and behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was confirmed when it was possible to obtain CCTV footage and reconstruct a picture of what happened. As a result, by the age of 13, he was struggling academically and had a fragile psyche. Once unable to bear such a life, Steinkind attempted to hang himself, but was fortunately stopped in time. Afterward, doctors diagnosed him with depression and hyperactivity. Bullied at school, he decided to stop attending. Over time, Jeremy fancied himself immortal and began frequenting websites of similar themes. His online profile was filled with topics like pain, self-harm, blood, and razor blades. No one knew about the couple's forbidden relationship except their friends, who found their love, to say the least, peculiar. Their communication would have remained a secret had the Richardsons not started monitoring their daughter's excessive internet use. Deborah and Mark discovered Jasmine was corresponding with strangers, alarming them as any parent would. Therefore, they decided to remove the computer from the girl's reach. Moreover, they were shocked to learn she had fallen for an adult man with dubious interests. His very nickname, Soul Eater, spoke volumes. Thus, Jasmine and Jeremy's relationship became forbidden. To help their daughter break free from this destructive relationship, Deborah and Mark sought a psychologist's help. They sincerely believed that counseling would benefit their parent-child relationship. To their delight, it did. Jasmine showed compliance and seemed to be returning to a normal life, promising that it was all in the past she got her computer back. This became the Richardsons' last fateful decision, leading to their demise. Saturday, April 22, 2006. Preparing for bed, Mrs. Richardson heard a noise in the basement. Rats again, she thought. Descending, she turned on the light and saw a person in a ski mask. He stood opposite her, looking at her. Startled, she screamed. The stranger rushed at her, covering her mouth. His efforts were in vain. Deborah struggled and screamed louder. He stepped back, drew a knife and stabbed her in the chest, then again and again. Hearing his wife's screams, Mark rushed down, grabbing the first thing he could find, a screwdriver. He had been fixing an outlet that day and by sheer chance left a tool out. Entering the basement, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife lying in a pool of blood and someone standing next to her. Mark immediately attacked the intruder but received a stab wound to the stomach, followed by more stabs. As the searing pain subsided and his eyes began to close, Mr. Richardson quietly asked, "Why?" "Because your daughter wished it," the attacker replied. Upstairs, Tyler was the only one left. The boy sat on his bed in his pajamas, too frightened to move. The approaching footsteps grew louder, and the bedroom door opened. A few days before the murder, Jasmine was overjoyed. Her parents believed in her remorse, meaning they could now communicate again. Mobile phones were just becoming popular at that time, so the computer remained the only means of communication. As soon as Miss Richardson regained internet access, she immediately wrote to Jeremy. "It all starts with them disappearing and ends with us staying together," she told him. During the days when the young lady was visiting the psychologist, a terrible plan had formed in her head. It solidified over several days of punishment. Surprisingly, Steinka found it enticing but added that everything needed to be done creatively and with attention to detail. The couple understood that they could not be together as long as the Richardsons were alive. Later, Jasmine's friends recalled how often she spoke about her parents, particularly how much they annoyed her. Therefore, she wanted to end their lives. However, no one took Jasmine's words seriously. Saturday, April 22, 2006. Garrett headed across the street to his friend Tyler's house. The boy wanted to play. The weather was nice outside, despite being chilly. Such was the spring that year. When Garrett approached the house, he noticed the blinds were still closed. No one answered his knock on the door. Strange, he thought. The Richardsons should be home. Their car is parked in the driveway. It was on June 25, 2001 and charged with first-degree murder. After spending 6 months in custody, she was released on bail. The first trial soon commenced. The prosecution's main theory was the motive for the homicide. Hoping to see someone, the child curiously peeked into the living room window but saw no one. Then, Garrett decided to walk around to the back of the basement, where he often played with Tyler. Peeking through the window, he saw something strange on the floor. It appeared to be two silhouettes in a pool of blood. The boy informed his mother. Skeptical, she decided to check on the family across the street. They approached the house together. Garrett pointed to the window he had looked through earlier. The woman looked in and recoiled in horror. She immediately called emergency services. Something happened at the Richardsons. They seemed to be lying in the basement floor, all in blood, the neighbor reported. The police arrived promptly. Breaking down the front door, they descended to where Garrett and his mother had seen something. Entering the dark basement, the officers had difficulty recognizing the people lying on the ground. Their bodies were mutilated and bloodied, but there was no doubt. It was Mark and Deborah Richardson, and they were deceased. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, walls, even the ceiling. A bloody mess. No other way to describe what was before them. Later, the police searched the house. In the upstairs children's room, they found a small child. The boy lay in bed among toys, splattered with blood, with visible knife wounds. The child's throat had been deeply cut. Medicine Hat had never seen such horror. One officer said, "It will take me decades to forget what I saw today." After the house was searched, the police realized one family member was missing. The Richardsons' eldest daughter was gone. Officers worried she might be in danger. Everything indicated the attack occurred in the basement and the child's room. The rest of the house was undisturbed, and at first glance, nothing was missing. The state of the bodies suggested the crime occurred the previous night. Apparently, the perpetrator broke into the house and attacked the boy and his parents. Then what happened to Jasmine, and where was she? The police began to construct theories about what had happened. Perhaps by some stroke of luck, the girl was somewhere outside the home safe, or the perpetrator had abducted her and was now harming her. Or maybe a ransom demand from relatives would come with time. However, as time passed, there were no clear answers. Soon detectives turned to the media requesting help in the search for the missing girl. They hoped Jasmine would make contact or someone would provide valuable information. Meanwhile, the investigation into the crime continued. Investigators interviewed relatives, friends, and colleagues about all aspects of the slain family's life. Did they have any adversaries or enemies capable of such a heinous act? However, the more the investigation progressed, the clearer it became. There was no reason to wish death upon anyone in the Richardson family. They were truly wonderful people, faithful spouses and loving parents, except for the eldest daughter. Officers learned that the girl had been causing quite a bit of trouble lately. Therefore, the tone of media announcements changed. This time, the investigation wanted to locate a person of interest. It was entirely possible that the girl knew details about the crime, or she might have been involved in it. Considering the suspect's age, the media could no longer publish her real name, as per Canadian law. Thus, news agencies began to refer to Jasmine Richardson as JR. After it became known about her relationship with Jeremy Stunink, the couple was declared wanted. Initially, the search for the young lovers began among their friends and acquaintances, thinking they might be hiding out with them. However, this lead proved to be a dead end for the police, but they did uncover something intriguing. A few hours after the crime, the young couple was spotted at a restaurant and at a party hosted by an acquaintance. Someone from their circle of friends mentioned that Jasmine appeared unchanged. There was no indication she had been abducted or was in a state of shock. She was drinking and having fun. When friends asked how they managed to escape from her parents, Jasmine laughed. "Jeremy and I just took care of them." "Yes," the boy agreed. "I carved them up like fish." The party guests laughed, thinking at a grim joke, unaware that the statement was true. The involvement in the crime was also confirmed by a comic found in Jasmine's school locker, where she detailed how she would deal with each of her family members, with her boyfriend as her accomplice. Photos of the suspects were distributed widely. It was only a matter of time before a citizen would step forward with information about their whereabouts. Soon enough, information came in. The couple was spotted in the community of Letter, Saskatchewan, approximately 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. Caught off guard, Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinko were found sleeping peacefully in a pickup truck. Without resistance, they were taken to the police station. Naturally, the couple was interrogated separately, starting with Jasmine. She shared that she was deeply in love with Steinko and he reciprocated her feelings. However, the difference in age and social status was a barrier between them. According to Jasmine, the Richardsons would never have accepted their relationship. Therefore, Jeremy committed the ultimate act of love. He ended her parents' lives, providing them the chance to be together. When detectives asked if Jasmine was involved in the crime, she said, "I wasn't home when the crimes occurred. I didn't know about what had happened. After I found out, I accepted it. I loved Jeremy very much, so I ran away with him. Detectives needed to determine who was the main instigator. Since breaking the suspects proved difficult, the investigation used a cunning strategy. They placed an informant in the cell with Jeremy, who skillfully extracted details that contradicted Jasmine's statements. Jeremy confessed to the informant that the plan to end her parents' lives was Jasmine's idea. Initially, he was not supportive, but agreed after they discovered the forbidden love and took away her computer. I took care of Deborah and Mark Richardson, and Jasmine took care of her younger brother herself. She literally begged me to leave Tyler for her, though I was glad to settle scores with all of them, Jeremy cruelly revealed. After this confession, investigators confronted Miss Richardson with the recording. She had no choice but to confess to everything, admitting she stabbed her younger brother out of mercy, not wanting to leave him an orphan. Later, the couple shared their social media profiles and passwords with the investigation, which began to examine their correspondence. They had sent each other thousands of messages confirming Jeremy's statements indeed conceived the plan on her own. Steinke wrote that Jasmine was the only person who supported and approved of his tastes, replacing the society he felt alienated from. Fearing he would lose her, he helped realize the dreadful idea. I want to slit their throats. They will regret what they have done, especially when I make sure they're gone. They'll pay for the insults. Finally, there will be silence. Their blood will be the payment. Jeremy supported his beloved. His friends also reported that just a few hours before the attack, they watched the 1994 film Natural Born Killers, which portrays a couple committing 9 heinous murders. This story inspired their friend, who said he wanted to enact a similar plan with his girlfriend. I think it's the best love story of all time, Steinke said. With sufficient evidence at hand, the suspects were charged with 3 counts of homicide. The detectives pieced together the confessions of the accused, witness testimonies, and other case evidence to form a clear picture of the crime. Before the act, Jeremy was intoxicated. Jasmine led him into the house and guided him to the basement, where he attacked her mother. Deborah was the first to die, suffering 12 stab wounds across her body. The deepest wound pierced her chest, reaching 12 centimeters deep and striking her heart. In a rage, Jeremy mercilessly continued his assault on Mark, who sustained 24 wounds, 9 of which were in the back. Like his wife, the family patriarch bled out on the basement floor. Tyler Richardson was the last to die, while Steinke was dealing with the parents downstairs, inflicted 5 stab wounds on her younger brother upstairs. After Jeremy finished, he went upstairs to help his girlfriend with the child, coldly slashing the boy's throat as if carving a pumpkin. Afterward, Jeremy went home to wash off the blood, while Jasmine caught a taxi to a restaurant where the couple had agreed to meet. After discussing the night's events, they headed to a party. A friend of Jeremy's, Casey Lancaster, helped them dispose of the evidence and reach Saskatchewan. Words fail to describe the horror they created, using them to poison her husband, Gregory de Villiers, staging a suicide scene in their apartment, scattering his body with red rose petals. Case of Christian and Newsom. A new judge scheduled hearings for all 5 individuals involved in the students' tragic end. He embarked on their murderous spree with such ease and nonchalance as if driven by some otherworldly force. It is shocking that during interrogations and their time in custody, not a word of regret or remorse was uttered for their actions. While detained, they wrote letters to each other calling themselves legends and immortals. In one letter, Steinke proposed to Richardson, who joyfully accepted. Then, unexpectedly, their mad love began to fade like last year's snow. During the trial, they shifted the blame onto each other. In June 2007, Jasmine Richardson was the first to stand trial. She pleaded not guilty, claiming to have been in a zombie-like state and unable to act while Jeremy was killing her family. She also claimed she only wounded her younger brother, and it was Steinke who delivered the fatal blow. Jasmine insisted that their discussions about ending her parents' lives were purely hypothetical, but they appealed to Jeremy so much that he compelled her to turn them into reality. Under 3 counts of homicide, Miss Richardson was sentenced to just 10 years in prison, thanks to the nuances of Canadian juvenile criminal justice law, which states that individuals under 14 cannot be sentenced to more than 10 years of imprisonment. The sentence was aimed more at rehabilitating and restoring the girl's psyche than punishing her. In 2008, Jeremy Steinke's trial commenced. He insisted he had no initial intention of ending the lives of his girlfriend's parents. However, once discovered in the basement, he felt compelled to attack. He claimed he did not harm Tyler, suggesting Jasmine was responsible while he merely watched from the doorway. The defense argued that Jasmine had intentionally seduced him, wishing for him to free her from her parents' strict control. Some friends testified that Jeremy had sought their help with the act, driven by his fear of losing Jasmine to the extent of being willing to do anything. The lawyers also requested the charges be reduced to manslaughter, arguing Steinke was under the influence of substances at the time of the act. Steinke's inconsistencies emerged when asked by the prosecution why he committed the act. He replied, "When you find your other half, you do whatever it takes for them." Throughout the trial, he remained indifferent to the proceedings, but broke down when Jacqueline May, his mother, testified in his defense. She admitted to bearing significant guilt for his upbringing, as he was often attacked by her partners, subjected to beatings and rejection. Steinke was found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree homicide, receiving 3 life sentences. He would be eligible for parole no earlier than 25 years later, in 2033. Charges of complicity in the act against Casey Lancaster were dropped. In Medicine Hat Court, she was found guilty of obstruction of justice, sentenced to a year of house arrest, and prohibited from consuming drugs and alcohol. While in custody, Jeremy Steinke changed his name to Jackson May. Jasmine Richardson's 10-year sentence included 4 years in a psychiatric facility where she was diagnosed with conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder, indicative of a refusal to follow rules and socially unacceptable behavior, typically more associated with children than adults. This underscored her psychological immaturity and instability during her relationship with Steinke. In her final years under conditional community supervision and attending special programs, medical professionals reported her genuine remorse. After serving her full sentence, she was released in 2016. Apparently, Jasmine Richardson lives in Canada under an assumed name, her true identity still protected from media disclosure. Her return sparked significant public debate, with some arguing she deserved a second chance while others believed she warranted a harsher penalty. Nonetheless, the residents of Medicine Hat would prefer not to have Ms. Richardson as their neighbor again, given the brutality of her crime. Whether Jasmine has truly changed after spending her formative years in detention remains to be seen. Time will tell, and silently conceal. Sadly, the dead cannot speak. Jennifer's life was cut short in her prime. Regrettably, she realized too late an essential truth. Staying away from certain individuals and ceasing communication with them could mean saving oneself. Amy Widener faced a significant life change when she became a mother at only giving birth to a daughter. This development was notably challenging for her mother, Gloria Widener. Despite the difficulties, Gloria steadfastly supported her daughter. Little did Gloria know that the complexity of handling her daughter's early pregnancy would soon be eclipsed by an even more distressing event affecting their family just 2 years later. Born in 1973, Amy Widener was part of a large family that included her older brother, John Paul, who was 1 year older than Amy, and 2 younger sisters, Nay and Cassie, who were 1 and 4 years younger respectively. Their mother, Gloria Widener, single-handedly raised the children following a long-ago divorce from their father, who played no role in their upbringing. The family of 5 resided in Indianapolis, where Amy was her mother's primary aide, handling cooking, cleaning, and caring for her sisters. Amy harbored dreams of becoming a teacher. She was known for her bright and cheerful demeanor as well as an engaging smile. However, at age 14, Amy's life took an unexpected turn when she became pregnant. Initially hesitant to share the news with her mother, she concealed her growing belly under loose clothing for over 5 months. Eventually, the pregnancy became difficult to hide any longer. After nearly 6 months, Amy found the courage to approach her mother. Breaking down in tears, she revealed her situation. "Mom, I don't want you to hate me," she tearfully confided. Although taken aback by the news, Gloria embraced her daughter with comforting words of support despite feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about what lay ahead. "I was stunned. I just couldn't believe it," Gloria recounted later. "I thought it was the worst thing that could happen in my life," she added, unaware of even more heart-wrenching events that were yet to unfold. Amy Widener's baby was fathered by Tony Abba, 20, who was a friend of her elder brother. Their relationship had been a well-kept secret. None of their family members were aware of their intimacy until Amy's pregnancy came to light. Gloria, Amy's mother, swiftly intervened. She prohibited any further contact between Amy and Tony. She insisted that Amy cut ties completely with the father of her unborn child, laying down strict conditions for her daughter's future interactions. On October 25, 1987, Amy Widener embraced motherhood by welcoming her daughter Emily into the world. Remarkably, just 6 days after giving birth, Amy resumed her education. Now she juggled the responsibilities of being a new mother. Gloria Widner, recognizing the importance of education for her daughter's future, provided unwavering support to Amy. She often cared for Emily to facilitate Amy's schooling. Gloria also acknowledged Amy's need for a typical teenage life and allowed her time with friends. Amy's dedication to her studies never waned. Even amidst the demands of motherhood, she continued to excel academically, earning praise from her teachers for her diligence and hard work. The Widner family adapted to the new addition by sharing the responsibilities of caring for Emily. Life seemed to be realigning on a positive path as years passed. Amy successfully navigated her challenges. However, just as they found their footing, a sudden turn of events altered everything. On November 13, 1989, 16-year-old Amy awoke with a severe sore throat and decided to stay home from school with her 2-year-old daughter Emily. When Gloria offered to take Emily to the nanny's house, Amy opted to keep her daughter with her. After the family shared breakfast, they dispersed for the day. Gloria headed to work, and Amy's siblings went off to school, leaving Amy and Emily at home alone. Concerned after no answer from multiple calls made at 9:30 a.m., and again hours later, Gloria asked a neighbor to check in on them. The neighbor's report of an unresponsive and unusually quiet house worried Gloria, so she left work and rushed home. Upon arrival, she found Emily sitting on the stairs. Receiving no answer to her calls for us, Amy prompted her venture upstairs. The scene in Amy's bedroom was tragic and shocking, a moment etched forever in memory. Amy lay lifeless and unclad on her bed, surrounded by a significant amount of blood. In a state of emergency, Gloria immediately dialed 911. Upon arrival, the police commenced a meticulous examination of the Widener residence. The scene initially suggested an attempted burglary as stereo equipment and a graphic equalizer belonging to Amy's older brother John were missing. Also gone from Amy's room was a simple glass jar piggy bank containing around $50 saved for school. There were no signs of forced entry. The perpetrator might have entered through an unlocked back door or possibly the front door opened by Amy herself. Crucial evidence was found in Amy's room. There was bloody palm print on the bed linen and wall, along with several strands of body and head hair, presumably from the assailant. The medical examiner concluded that Amy Widener sustained a blow to the head with a sharp object. She was sexually assaulted and ultimately strangled. It's deeply unsettling that Emily, Amy's 2-year-old daughter, could have witnessed these harrowing events. Fortuitously, she was found unharmed. Recognizing any information Emily might provide as potentially valuable, police made efforts to communicate with her, despite her young age of just over 2 years. They used finger puppets to create a more child-friendly environment and gently probed for details she could recall. During this interaction, Emily, energetically moving around, mentioned only that her mother seemed very angry that day. As part of the evidence collection process, police sectioned off and removed the portion of the wall bearing the assailant's bloody palm print. They also gathered the victim's clothing and bed linens from the crime scene to aid their investigation into this tragic case. In their pursuit for answers regarding Amy Widener's case, detectives initiated inquiries among her family, friends, and nearby residents. John Paul, Amy's 17-year-old brother, mentioned how the investigators initially suspect him during the interrogation. However, he had a reliable alibi, and no evidence linked him to the incident. Tony Abia, Amy's former boyfriend and Emily's father, was also interrogated. He expressed deep affection for Amy and denied any harmful intentions towards her. Tony had a solid alibi for the day of the crime. The police's attention was also drawn to Troy Jackson, who lived next to the Wideners. He knew about the stereo system stolen on the day of the murder. Despite his denial of involvement and the absence of any bruises or scratches on his hands, Troy provided hair samples that did not match those found at the crime scene. After passing a polygraph test, suspicions against him were dropped. Besides these three, the police interviewed other acquaintances, neighbors, and classmates of Amy. Fingerprints and hair samples were taken from all of them, but none fell under suspicion. Amy Widener's funeral was held shortly afterward, drawing a considerable crowd who wished to pay their respects. Her death was deeply felt within the community. Detectives attended the funeral too, carefully observing the attendees as part of their ongoing investigation. A particularly poignant memory was a cherished photograph of Amy, where she wore her favorite white turtleneck vest with a floral design. It was in this beloved attire that Amy, a young girl whose life was tragically cut short, was laid to rest. In the aftermath of their tragic loss, The Widner family clung to hope that Amy's killer would be swiftly apprehended and brought to justice. Yet as days turned into weeks and then months, no suspects were identified. Following Amy's passing, Gloria Widner legally adopted her granddaughter Emily, stepping into the role of motherhood once again. The weight of grief and fear burdened Gloria. She was haunted by thoughts of the perpetrator and worried about her family's safety. She never left her daughters unattended at home and lived in a state of constant anxiety with the assailant still at large. Gloria even considered relocating to a new home for safety reasons. Financial constraints limited their options, leaving them to navigate these challenging times in their current residence. Amy's friends were also deeply affected by the tragedy, consumed by fear that the criminal might target them next. They requested their parents to fortify their homes, even boarding up windows with planks, a precautionary measure against a similar fate. One day, Gloria returned home expecting to find her younger daughters back from school. Upon entering, she was met with an unsettling silence. The house felt unusually empty. She noticed that the girls' outdoor shoes were in their usual spot. A surge of dreadful thoughts raced through her mind, apprehending another calamity with each step towards the upstairs. The distance felt increasingly vast. Standing at the threshold of their bedroom, Gloria steeled herself for what she might find. Upon entering, she discovered, much to her relief, that her daughters had merely fallen asleep. As time went on, Emily, Amy's daughter, matured. She was spared the memories of the tragic events surrounding her biological mother. Emily had no recollection of the police interrogation or being informed of her mother's demise. The detectives periodically revisited the Wagner family, inadvertently causing them to revisit the pain of that dreadful day. Gloria revealed that there came a time when this continual revisiting became too much to bear. She yearned for one thing, for the authorities to allow her family some peace, and to cease reawakening memories that could not bring Amy back. 13 years after Amy Wagner's murder in February 2002, an unexpected development arose in the case. The Indianapolis Police Department received a call from a 29-year-old man claiming to have had a dream where Amy communicated with him about her demise. Although he provided details about the murder, most of this information had already been disclosed in news reports. The police investigated this individual, who was 16 at the time of the incident, and resided across the street from Amy's home. His fingerprints and DNA were examined to determine any potential involvement, but no matches were found, leading to his release. While his call didn't contribute significant evidence, it prompted detectives to re-examine the cold case in February 2002. The investigation re-engaged with some of Amy's friends and acquaintances, particularly those who had encountered legal issues over the intervening years. Despite renewed efforts, the investigation once again reached an impasse, leaving the case unsolved. In 2011, a Facebook group titled Remembering Amy Weir was established by Amy's friends, reigniting interest in her unsolved case. The detective responsible for the cold case, unfamiliar with Facebook, enlisted the help of his colleague, Detective Bill Carter, to print out information from the group. This task piqued Carter's interest in Amy Weir's case. Although his expertise was in non-homicide-related illegal activities, Carter felt compelled to explore the case files of Amy's murder during his free time. Carter delved deep into the 2-decade-old case. He scrutinized every detail in the file, re-examining evidence and reviewing school attendance records from the day of the murder. He also scrutinized the funeral attendance list. He inputted the case details into a database and identified overlooked leads, including several friends of Amy's brother, who had never been interviewed by the police, nor had their DNA been collected. In his pursuit of new leads, Detective Carter reached out to the Weir family and Amy's friends in 2011, seeking names of individuals who might possess information about the case. He initiated DNA collection from persons previously overlooked in the initial 1989 investigation following the crime. The police had canvassed the neighborhood where the Weirs lived and documented residents' names. Amy had long-standing friends, and while she reiterated most of the previously known and investigated, she also mentioned an unfamiliar name to Detective Carter, Rodney Dink. In 2012, Detective Carter received authorization from the Cold Case Unit to formally take on Amy Wagner's case. His first step was to locate Rodney Dink to ascertain whether he could be a potential suspect. The Widener family was quite familiar with Rodney, as he was a friend of Amy's older brother, John Paul. They spent time together engaging in activities like biking and fishing. When Carter inquired about Rodney with John Paul, he described him as a reserved individual who largely kept to himself and had never aroused suspicion. Carter visited the home of 40-year-old Rodney Dink, who resided with his mother near the Wideners. Rodney was employed at an auto parts store, had been divorced for some time, and had a grown son with whom he had minimal contact. Upon Carter's arrival at Rodney's residence, his mother greeted him and informed the detective that Rodney was at work. Carter left his business card requesting Rodney contact him upon his return. That evening, Rodney called Carter, who promptly requested a meeting to discuss Amy Wagner's murder case. Rodney consented to the meeting and allowed Carter to visit at his house. However, when Carter returned for the meeting, Rodney was nowhere to be found. Carter examined Rodney's criminal background and found that he had previous charges for assault in 1991 and theft in 1997. With Rodney's fingerprints already in the database, they were compared with the palm print found at the Wagner residence. This test aimed to either connect or exonerate Rodney from the crime. When the results came back, they confirmed a match between Rodney's prints and the bloody palm print at the crime scene. After 23 years, a suspect was finally identified. However, Rodney had vanished from his home, prompting an intensive search by the police. The breakthrough came when Rodney's credit card activity revealed a rented car with an OnStar tracking system. The detectives located the car in Indianapolis where Rodney was hiding. Rodney, while at a friend's house, was confronted by the police, brandishing a knife and declaring his innocence. He ultimately injured himself during the encounter. He attempted to attack the officers but was subdued with a taser, handcuffed, and then taken to the hospital. During a 2-day hospital interrogation that was recorded on camera, Rodney confessed to Amy's murder. He initially claimed his intent had been burglary and had not anticipated Amy's presence due to her illness. Rodney recounted entering through a sliding glass door and being startled by Amy. In a panic, he hastily grabbed the nearest object and struck her on the head, which led to her death. As he recounted the incident over 2 days, Rodney frequently mentioned his vague recollection of the events of that day. He attributed this fogginess to the 23 years that had elapsed since the crime occurred. His account of his actions lacked precision. At one point, he even suggested he had visited the house with an acquaintance he referred to as Bag. However, Rodney struggled to recall clear details about this supposed accomplice and could not provide a description of their appearance. According to Rodney, Bage had initially kept watch outside before joining him inside, where they both confronted Amy. When questioned about Emily's presence during the incident, Rodney claimed he did not see her, nor was aware of her cries in the house, oblivious to the fact that she had been nearby throughout the ordeal. Throughout the interrogation, Rodney remained composed and polite, not exhibiting behavior typically associated with a murderer, possibly due to the passage of time since committing the crime. His DNA sample was taken, and as anticipated it matched that found in 1989 on Amy Wagner's bedsheet and blanket. The disclosure of Rodney's guilt came as a profound shock to the Wagner family. They struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, unassuming Rodney with his heinous act. Rodney wasn't just Amy's older brother, John Paul's friend and classmate. He also lived across the street and frequently visited their home. Remarkably, Rodney had even attended Amy's funeral, mourning with others and extending condolences to Gloria Wagner. Later, Detective Carter discovered Rodney's signature in the guest book at Amy's funeral. Upon revisiting the case, he found that Rodney's name was first mentioned in February 2003 by Tony Abercrombie, Amy's former boyfriend and Emily's biological father, who pointed out Rodney's regular visits to the Wagner family. Carter deduced that back in 1989, for some unknown reason, Rodney Den had evaded suspicion entirely. He wasn't considered a suspect or even questioned at that time. In 2012, while investigating Rodney Dan's background further, detectives unearthed another grim detail. Rodney's biological son Dylan Danke was imprisoned for a crime committed in February 2009. At just 16 years old, Dylan had fatally assaulted his birth mother, Mary McHenry. He claimed he acted out due to her abuse and insults, ultimately using a baseball bat to inflict fatal injuries. Tragically, Mary succumbed to her wounds. Dylan turned 17 just days after the incident. This eerie parallel, father and son committing significant crimes at almost similar ages, struck detectives as both chilling and peculiar. Despite having minimal involvement in Dylan's upbringing due to divorcing Mary McHenry early on, Rodney appeared at Dylan's trial in February 2009 and agreed to a plea deal resulting in a 20-year prison sentence. Dylan's anticipated release will be in 2029 when he turns 37 years old. In the ongoing investigation of Amy Wagner's case, Rodney Dink initially maintained that he had an accomplice during the crime, a young man. In June 2013, merely 10 days before his trial was scheduled to commence, year-old Rodney recanted his previous statement. He admitted to acting alone in the murder of Amy, asserting that no one else was involved. As a result of this confession and the evidence against him, Rodney received a sentence of 65 years in prison. Following the resolution of Amy's case, the Waiter family arranged a gathering with Detective Bill Carter. They commemorated the 24 years without Amy by releasing 24 balloons into the sky. The family expressed their gratitude for Detective Carter's pivotal role in the case. It was Carter who pinpointed Rodney Den as the perpetrator within just 12 days of delving into the case and brought the investigation to a close. In recognition of his outstanding work, Detective Bill Carter was honored with an award by the Indianapolis Police Department in January 2014. Despite an offer to join the Homicide Investigation Department, he chose to remain in his current role. Emily Ware, Amy's daughter, matured into adulthood. She graduated from the same high school her biological mother had attended before pursuing higher education at a university. Seeking broader opportunities, she relocated from Indianapolis to California. Gloria Ware, Amy's mother, openly shared her enduring grief and daily remembrance of her daughter. She continues to reside in the house where the tragedy unfolded. Amy's room, still adorned with her photographs, now welcomes Gloria's grandchildren during their holiday visits. This brings a new sense of joy and life to a space once marked by loss. 19-year-old Mia Marcano was born in Pembroke Pines, Florida to parents Marlon and Emma, and she had a little brother, Marlon Jr., who she called Munchie. Her mother and father had separated when she was young, but they all remained close, and Mia and Marlon Jr. got on really well with their stepmom Giselle too. Mia was described as ambitious and adventurous, a loyal and protective person, especially when it came to her brother. Her family said she had a great energy that people just gravitated towards. When it came time to finalizing her plans after high school, staying in Florida was a must. She loved her life there and decided on the University of Central Florida, before moving and settling into Valencia College to pursue an associate degree in arts. She later wanted to train in either sports medicine or physiotherapy. The creative arts was always a big love for her, fashion and design as well, and she was a frequent fixture in the local carnivals. Again, the Sunshine State was a great place for all things festivals, fairs, food and fun. The perfect home for Mia. While studying, she was staying at the Ardenvillers apartment complex with the vast majority of people living there being fellow students, and when she managed to get a job at the complex too, helping to lease these apartments, it was a win-win. Something she didn't have to travel for and was easy to do around her studies. She was only an hour's flight away from her family and would often jet back to catch up, never going long without seeing them. On the 24th of September, 2021, was set to grab a flight home for the weekend, but when she didn't send a text to say that she had arrived at the airport or was boarding her flight, alarm bells rang. It was such a natural thing for most people to do, and Mia was always in communication with her family. It was now hours later and long past the time she was due in, but she never got off the plane. When it got to around 9:30 on that Friday night, her family could no longer rationalize her not answering her phone. They reported it to the police and requested that a welfare check be carried out. Deputy Samir Polino went over to Ardenvillers, arriving at 10:02 p.m., but no one was there. He noted that nothing on the outside looked out of the ordinary and nothing stood out to him as being wrong. He waited for her roommate and eventually got in. They knocked on Mia's bedroom, but there was still no answer, and when they tried to force the door, it was obvious it was locked from the inside. The deputy then checked through her window and saw a small bookcase against her door. He finally managed to open the window and get in. Her room painted a troubling picture. Everything was a mess, and red stains covered the pillows. Her bedding was everywhere, and her luggage, ready to go with her to the airport, was sat by her desk. Her father Marlon had put his own locks on her windows for extra safety, but these had been broken off. Some of her jewelry was also broken, with no indication at all as to where she was. There was a lot to go over. Despite how concerning the inside of the apartment looked, Deputy Paulino discussed the case with his supervisor, Corporal Dale, but neither of them notified the Criminal Investigations Division. Paulino also left the scene to respond to other calls without informing anyone about the evidence of a potential crime he found inside the apartment. Her roommate was upset and concerned and was quick to give the police a name. Mia had recently been getting some unwanted attention from a maintenance worker in the complex. He had become more and more persistent, and as a result things were very uncomfortable for Mia. This man was 27-year-old Armando Caballero, and he had been working at the apartment complex since June of that year. More people backed what her roommate was saying and said they had seen this happening too. By the sounds of it, Armando was obsessed with the 19-year-old and was constantly finding ways to talk to her and ask her out. She had rejected him so many times and was now bordering on being a bit scared about it all. He even sent her $700 via Cash App for, quote, being pretty. She sent the money straight back but didn't really know what to do anymore other than try and ignore him. Other women at the complex had had their own issues with Armando, and the police were suddenly receiving a lot of the same information about him. Another woman living at the Sobel Club apartments later told investigators that he had written her a note asking her for a date back in March 2021. She wasn't sure but had agreed to go anyway. But when he asked to hang out sooner, she said she couldn't, and he was not happy. After this, a weight was thrown at her window in the middle of the night. She said given the way he had been behaving, she felt sure it was him and called the police. They logged it and made some searches. But eventually the case was dropped and he was not charged. Just a couple of months later, Armando was working at Arden Villas. As Mia's family arrived at around 3 a.m. to help with the search, they pointed out several things to Deputy Paulino that they were worried weren't standing out to him. One of them was a yellow box cutter under the bed and her childhood teddy bear, which her family said she would take with her on every trip no matter how short it might be, was there too. An hour later at 4 a.m., a familiar face arrived in front of Mia's apartment with his roommate, Armando himself. It was now close to 5 a.m. Armando was off work and had no reason to be turning up there. Mia's family had heard enough about him to know exactly who he was. The fact he was there with no need to be was very unsettling for them. Why was he inserting himself into this? Detectives asked him if he knew what was going on, and he replied that he was on the phone with a coworker, Tatiana, who had allegedly informed him that Mia was missing, which was why he was there. Mia's family knew there was more to this, especially given everything that they had heard from Mia, and they wanted answers. He denied all their allegations, however. He told the officers that he hadn't seen her around the complex before she went missing. It was hours beforehand, and he didn't have anything else to offer. Detectives didn't feel they really had any reason to talk to him further, let alone arrest him. And with this, Armando left the complex. A background check showed he was a convicted felon, having been convicted in 2017 of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Back in 2013, he was arrested for using a destructive device resulting in property damage and discharging a weapon on school property. Polk County Sheriff's deputies were called to the campus of Warner University after a report of a bomb going off inside a dorm. The report said that Armando had admitted to using the improvised explosive as a prank on other residents in the dorm. Unfortunately, no one was injured. The security guard that worked on the complex managed to lift fingerprints from Mia's window using tape, but Deputy Paulino did not take them, saying that it wasn't a high-priority case and that he could keep the tape. The same guard had also noticed a screwdriver and cell phone case in the back seat of Armando's car. But with no warrant, they couldn't open it in search. Orange County Sheriff John Mina said, "There is not enough there in that video or happened that night to establish an arrest or that this person has to be detained." A different deputy was soon notified about Mia's case and went to the apartment at the request of her aunt. He was very troubled by what he was seeing and hearing and notified a missing persons detective immediately, and a formal investigation was quickly launched. It was now September 25th, 8:47 a.m. Investigators got a call from Mia's family saying they needed to head to Armando's apartment. Still bothered by him and convinced he knew more, they had started their own covert surveillance and had been watching him from their car. They saw him come outside with a glove, a backpack, and a pink blanket, a blanket they knew they recognized. When police got there, Armando gave Mia's family permission to come into the apartment, with the police watching on, so they could take a look around, but nothing could be touched or moved, and authorities could only watch as they didn't have a proper search warrant. At 3 p.m. hours later, Armando left his apartment, and just an hour and a half after that, police confirmed he was now indeed a suspect in the disappearance of Mia Marcano. Authorities were trying to get hold of a proper search warrant that would finally be approved just over 24 hours after Mia went missing. At 9:35 p.m. that same night, Armando sent a text message. After this, to everyone's surprise, he too would vanish. Was it possible that Mia was being held somewhere against her will and he had gone to meet her or move her, maybe even go on the run? Police just didn't know. Hundreds of volunteers were now joining in the search and miles of area were being combed through. But there was still no trace of Mia anywhere. Analysis of Mia's unit showed that at 2:14 p.m., just 3 hours before she was last seen, a master key had buzzed into her unit. But this was not her key. This fob was linked to none other than Armando. More checks showed that he had accessed her apartment again at 4:34 p.m., then buzzed into her unit to grab her bag and dash to the airport. A trip they knew she never made. This appeared to conclude that Armando was in Mia's apartment and waiting for her when she arrived home. And at 5:52 p.m., Armando's vehicle was picked up leaving Ardenvillers. The final and eerie image of her walking into her apartment that afternoon was now deeply unsettling given what police now knew she walked into. Her mom said she would scream at the picture, willing her to not go in and wishing that something could have distracted her or made her turn around. On September 27th, police had enough to arrest Armando on suspected burglary charges. They now knew there was more to this, but they just didn't have enough yet to make that charge. But before the arrest could take place, an unexpected call would be made. One that would shock everyone and change the course of everything. 27-year-old Armando Caballero had taken his own life. This was all unraveling very quickly, and with Armando now gone there was a worry that they would never be able to find Mia or reach any kind of conclusion. The search had to continue, mainly using Armando's phone data, and it was through this that they were able to start getting some answers. At 7:01 p.m., about 2 hours after Mia was last seen, Armando had logged a maintenance call. A call from Mia's unit. A call which was quickly determined to be totally fake, and had not been requested by Mia or her roommates. At 7:11 p.m., just 10 minutes later, Armando contacted the apartment office staff and asked to be let in at the complex gates. And then, 5 minutes later, Mia's own key fob was swiped at her unit, but no one entered. They could not say for sure that this was Armando, but they knew it definitely was not Mia. A short time then passed, and then at 7:40 p.m., Armando left the complex again in his car. More analysis of his phone showed that on the evening Mia went missing, he was near Timberscan, a place he used to live. On that day, he had stayed there for 20 minutes before leaving. There were a lot of abandoned homes and boarded-up buildings in the area, and residents said it always felt really unsafe and scary. If Armando used to live there, why did he need to go back? And for only 20 minutes? Part of his old apartment complex was now totally derelict, and there was a big wooded area surrounding it. The searches had been huge and covered miles and miles, but they now felt they had a place to focus on. They moved their search efforts over there, and the FBI were now involved too. Family and friends were still praying that she was alive somewhere. Although it wasn't looking good, they still had hope and were clinging on to everything they could. Saturday, October 2nd, 2021, after a week of searching, an awful discovery was made about 18 miles from Ardenvillers in an abandoned part of Timberscan Apartments. They had found a body. Mia was found bound with black duct tape on her hands and feet, and her mouth was covered with tape too. She was wearing jeans, her bra, and a robe. Her bag was located nearby, and inside it was the shirt she was last seen wearing and her ID. An autopsy would later confirm that she had died by homicide by undetermined means, but due to decomposition they couldn't determine anything else. The report also noted no identifiable evidence of trauma and no evidence of sexual assault. And testing from where Armando's body was found would come back too, and it confirmed the presence of Mia's blood and hair. The same black duct tape that was found around Mia's body was also found in his car. They also determined that 2 marks on his finger were consistent with bite marks, and he had more marks on his body that showed he was involved with a struggle very recently. As quick as everything had happened, it had now suddenly all come to a painful end, but no one had any answers. What happened in her apartment that day will now never ever be known, and any chance of closure has been lost forever. Other residents of her apartment complex were horrified, especially as they had been logging safety concerns for ages. What happened to Mia was everyone's worst nightmare, and they all felt let down in a lot of ways. One resident said was just creepy, and the fact that maintenance people have access to our apartments and we just got these key fobs last month. If these key fobs weren't introduced last month, no one would have went into her apartment. If you really think about it, people who are living in apartment complexes are going to sleep at night not knowing that there is someone who has free access to their apartment. The Marcano's lawyer added. On October 15th, Mia was laid to rest in a funeral, which over 2,000 people would turn up for, and thousands of others were tuned into the live stream of. The aftermath of this case was massive, and a lot of action was taken in various ways. 2 deputies that had worked on the investigation were found to have violated department policies. It was determined that Deputy Samir Paulino did not follow proper procedure when he went to investigate the apartment, and he failed to report certain details to his supervisor, such as the blood being found on the pillow or the jewelry being found broken. Due to these errors, Mia was logged as a voluntary missing person instead of a missing endangered person, and thus the Criminal Investigations Division was not notified by him or his supervisor. Rick Raymond, a former police officer and now private investigator, said, He thinks enough red flags should have been set off when it came to Armando turning up that morning. When you have multiple individuals saying that item belongs to a missing individual and it is in this individual's vehicle, to me, that would have told me immediately I need to look at this guy, Rick said. But Sheriff Mina was quick to respond and said, "Remember that deputy didn't have all the information that we now have a week and a half later. So yes, all that takes time." He did acknowledge that more could have and should have been done, though. In the case of Mia Marcano's disappearance, managers in the responding deputy's chain of command recognized a lack of urgency on his part and asked that his role and the role of his corporal in the first hours of that incident be investigated by a professional standards division. As a result of this incident, we are in the process of making changes to policy that will direct first responding patrol deputies to immediately notify their supervisors and the missing persons unit in any case where someone is considered a missing endangered person. The sheriff's office said that Deputy Paulino received 150-hour unpaid suspension as discipline, and his supervisor, Corporal Kenneth Dale, was also found to have violated department policies. He received a 10-hour unpaid suspension as discipline. In March 2022, the police released their final report into Mia's disappearance and death. It was over 100 pages long and listed everything that they had on Armando Caballero and why he was and still is the only suspect in her case. Mia's family launched a wrongful death lawsuit against the apartment complex and another lawsuit against the Orange County Sheriff's Office, claiming the department handled her case carelessly and failed to treat her room as a crime scene. Arden Villas released a statement in response saying, "To ensure nothing like this happens again at Arden Villas, we are taking numerous proactive steps to enhance our security protocols. We are in the process of reviewing our entire security apparatus and will make changes or upgrades as warranted." They said that Armando was vetted through a national background check services provider and no records of burglary or sexual assault were found on him. But Mia's family said that the apartment complex hadn't even acknowledged she was missing, hadn't reached out to them, and it took them several days to issue any kind of statement about not only someone that lived there, but someone that was their coworker and friend too. The family is hoping that by pursuing this lawsuit, they can get answers to the numerous questions that remain unanswered and real change, said the Marcano's attorney, Daryl Washington. He added that Mia's family believes that other people could have aided Armando in killing Mia, and he also criticized the department's handling of Mia's case. The Marcano family say they have not received any reports or records of the investigation by the sheriff's office, but Sheriff Mina said the investigation is still ongoing. Many residents started protests about Arden Villas, and open letters were written to them detailing just how unsafe the complex actually felt and how many issues there had been going back to long before Mia went missing. It highlighted a lack of cameras, a lack of security, bad lighting, and awful maintenance, and places like the parking lot had not a single camera and was very poorly lit. The lawsuit launched by Mia's family against Arden Villas was eventually settled. In honor of what would have been her 20th birthday, the late teen was honored in a special way, with her family getting a key to the city of Pembroke Pines. Her birthday would also be officially named Mia Marcano Day. In June 2022, MIA's law, also known as Senate Bill 898, was signed into law. It states that property owners must conduct a background check of any potential employees. People with a violent criminal history or anyone listed as a sexual offender or sexual predator will not be eligible. And additionally, a log will need to be kept, tracking each unit's set of keys. And if maintenance does need to access a unit, they need to give the tenant a 24-hour notice period, instead of the previously required 12 hours. Her family set up the Mia Marcano Foundation, and their mission is to support, educate, and provide resources to families of missing persons while advocating for the protection of students and the most vulnerable. They often help support in searches for other missing people too and offer support to families going through what they did. They also set up the MMF Safe and Secure Accreditation Program. MMF aims to assist with ensuring the department complexes and multi-unit dwellings are as safe as possible and provides professional development for staff. They have made a lot of much-needed changes and are working tirelessly to carry on making those changes. When Mia Marcano booked her flight home to see her family on September 24, 2021, it was nothing but a totally standard and normal visit. What happened so quickly over such a short period of time will forever haunt everyone that knew her. There are still so many questions and no one is around to answer them. Her Aunt Pia said, "Can never take time for granted and life really is too short. Talking about Mia in the past, I always thought I had forever," she said. Mia's brother said nothing good that happens to him will ever give him pure happiness. No matter how amazing it is, he's reminded that he can't call his sister to tell her, and she can't be there to celebrate with him. Emma, Mia's mom, said, "For everyone else, life goes on, but I'm still here trying to figure this puzzle out. Will I ever finish this puzzle? I don't know. I think about her every day, every hour, every minute. She's everywhere. Her presence is everywhere. Every day I look at her pictures, but eventually that's it. There are no more pictures to be made. There are no more memories. Her pictures are going to fade, just like everything else. She'll be forever 19. On the night of May 26, 1995, 22-year-old Tracy Brazel went out with two of her friends to have a fun night at Kodiak Ron's pub in Everett, Washington. While her friends left after drinks, Tracy stayed back at the arcade to finish her game. But that was the last time they ever heard from her. Despite everything her family did to find her, no sign of Tracy ever emerged. 2 months after Tracy's disappearance, 26-year-old Patricia Patty Berry was reported missing around the same location and in similar circumstances. 8 days later, her lifeless body was found in the woods, leaving her family devastated. What could have happened to Tracy Brazel and Patricia Berry? Were both events connected? Everett is the largest city in Snohomish County, Washington, with a population of over 110,000 people. It is a place known for saltwater beaches, rolling hills, and river deltas, making it a beautiful spot to unwind in nature. Unfortunately for two young women and their families, this lovely town was the backdrop to tragedy and years of grief. Tracy Brazel was born on January 29, 1973, to Bill and Peggy Brazel in Glenridge, New Jersey. Tracy had an older sister, Lisa, whom she loved and emulated a lot as a child. Tracy had a contagious smile, enjoyed reading books, and was eager to learn from a very early age. In 1986, when Tracy was 13 years old, her parents Bill and Peggy started having issues that led to their divorce. Peggy got custody of the girls and decided to move closer to her family in Snohomish County, Washington. They relocated when Tracy and Lisa were 16 and 19 years old, respectively. Bill loved his children and kept in touch with them at Snohomish, despite being separated from his wife and living in New Jersey. Tracy and Lisa continued their education in Snohomish County. Tracy wanted to go to cosmetology school, and even though she was still in her junior year, she worked hard to earn credits. At cosmetology school, Tracy's bright personality made her popular with her classmates, but her best friend was Alana, popularly called Lonnie. Once school was over, Tracy got a job at Great Clips Hair Salon at Mill Creek. At the time, she was already in her early 20s and living independently at Keeler's Corner Apartments in Linwood. Even though Tracy had moved out, she kept in touch with her mother and sister. She would call her mother every day and also called her sister frequently. She maintained her close relationship with Alana, often going out to lunch together. In May 1995, Tracy sent a letter to her family, revealing that she wanted to change certain things about her life. She also enclosed a picture of herself wearing a business suit. Soon after Lisa and Peggy got Tracy's letter, her father Bill visited from New Jersey to check on her. Bill observed that Tracy had chosen to dye her hair platinum blonde. He also learned she was encountering difficulties with a coworker at her workplace. Tracy was going increasingly discontent with the very place she once envisioned as her dream job. And these sudden changes in his daughter's behavior left Bill feeling unsettled. Peggy did not notice anything unusual at the time. She was busy preparing for an overseas vacation with her mother on May 25, 1995, before going to the airport for their trip. Tracy's mother and grandmother stopped by her workplace to see her. A day later, on May 26, 1995, Tracy quit her job unexpectedly. Although the reasons were unclear, Tracy seemed happy about quitting her job and decided to celebrate at night with some friends. Her best friend Alana was out of the country at the time, but Tracy had made plans to meet her when she returned. She went out for drinks with her friends, Dina and David Conlin, who were siblings. They ended the night at Kodiak Ron's pub along Highway 99, where Tracy immersed herself in arcade games. As the clock inched past 1 a.m., Tracy told David and Dina not to wait for her as she wanted to finish her game. Her friends said their goodbyes and left shortly. It wasn't until 1:45 a.m. that Tracy finally left the pub alone. On May 30th, 1995, Alana got back from her trip and started calling Tracy to meet up for their planned lunch. But all her calls went unanswered. She left messages but could not get through to Tracy. Feeling anxious, Alana decided to go to Tracy's apartment to check on her. The front door was locked, and despite repeated knocking, Alana got no response. She eventually gave up and was about to leave when she noticed something that got her more bothered. It was Tracy's car, a white Ford Probe parked peculiarly on the side of the street instead of its usual spot inside of the apartment complex. Alana moved closer to the car only to make another disturbing discovery. The passenger side window was broken, but there was no glass pieces or shards inside the car. Immediately Alana called Tracy's mother, Peggy, but her line was not reachable when she was vacationing overseas. Alana called another family member about her worries, and together they visited the apartment and checked out Tracy's car. But without any sign of foul play, they assumed Tracy would be back soon and would get in touch when she saw Alana's messages. No one reported Tracy missing because her mother, who normally spoke to her every day, was out of the country and unreachable, and her co-workers at the hair salon were not expecting her since she quit her job. On June 4, 1995, Peggy's cruise ship docked in Montreal and her phone was working again. When she called home, Peggy got the devastating news that her youngest daughter was missing. She dashed home in a panic and with Lisa's help filed a missing persons report. By then, 8 days had already passed since Tracy was last seen at the pub. The Snohomish Police Department swung into action looking for Tracy. They went to Linwood to examine her apartment and her park. Ford. The police checked for fingerprints inside the car, but found nothing, not even Tracy's prints. It seemed as if someone had wiped the car clean. Not even the shattered glass from the window was found, except for a few tiny fragments on the back seat. The investigators could not get any useful leads, and the police department at the time also lacked funding to do anything significant with the bits of evidence collected from the car. The investigation was at a dead end. But Peggy could not sit back and wait for the police department to be funded. She contacted her friend Andy, a former police officer. He worked with the police officers in charge of the case and helped them analyze some of the evidence. Eventually, one solid piece of evidence emerged. A single drop of blood found on Tracy's car window. Unfortunately, there was no technology advanced enough to test the blood at the time. Once again, they had hit a dead end. And while the search for Tracy was going on, another young woman in the city went missing. Patricia Berry, popularly known as Patty, was born on February 10, 1969. Although no details about her childhood are known, Patty was a single mother working to support her 2-year-old daughter Jessica when she disappeared. In 1995, Patty took up work at a dancer at Honey's nightclub located along Highway 99. She didn't really like her job because she didn't think it was decent enough. But the pay was good and she needed money to complete her education and provide for Jessica. Patty told her mother, Nancy Stransrud, that once she was done with school, she would get a proper job she could be proud of. With her job as a nighttime dancer, Patty would leave her toddler with a babysitter in the evening and fetch her after she got off work in the morning. But on July 31, 1995, Patty did not show up at the babysitter's house. The babysitter called Nancy, Patty's mother, who immediately felt worried. Everyone knew how important Jessica was to Patty, and it was unthinkable that Patty had simply forgotten to pick up her daughter. They contacted every hospital in the area and the county morgue to see if anyone matching Patty's description had been brought in. Nancy finally called the police and reported Patty as missing. Instead of waiting for the police to take action, the whole family went out in search of Patty. The police sensed the urgency and immediately put out an all-points bulletin without waiting for 48 hours to pass. The investigators found that Patty had gotten off work around 1:30 a.m. on July 31, 1995. The bouncer on the shift that night at Honey's told investigators that he had walked Patty to her car and noticed she had a flat tire. Someone procured a fix a flat inflator, but it only got the faulty tire half inflated. Still, it was enough to carry her to the nearest gas station where she could fix the tire. With that information, the investigators traced the route they thought Patty would have taken and found a gas station. But a note taped on the air machine at the gas station said the machine was inoperable. This meant that Patty would have been unable to fill her tire there. While the investigators were out interviewing the people at the nightclub, Patty's family was also searching for her. And they would be the ones to stumble on the next important lead. They found Patty's missing car close to a car wash behind a convenience store in South Everett, parked away from sight. They did not touch the car for fear of ruining evidence, but upon peeking inside, they saw a disturbing sight and immediately called the police. The car's interiors were covered in a massive amount of blood. This was no longer a missing persons case, but something much worse. When the police examined the scene, they concluded that someone wanted to conceal Patty's car from sight. They also noticed that the car wash offered air-filling facilities, so Patty might have stopped there to fix the tire the night she disappeared. There were drops of blood on the exterior of the car, indicating that Patty was probably attacked when she was trying to fix her flat tire. The massive amount of blood in the interior meant that the attack had continued inside the car. The police searched the surrounding area and found items that belonged to Patty. With a sinking feeling, investigators understood that something bad had happened to Patty. On August 8, 1995, 8 days after Patty had gone missing, two kids playing in the wooded area just south of Everett Mall saw something so gruesome. They went shrieking and running to the adults. Police arrived to find the lifeless body of Patty Berry, nude from the waist down and bearing 18 stab wounds. Although Patty's family feared she was attacked, the news of her death confirmed their worst fear. According to the autopsy, Patty's killer possibly intended to molest her, and due to the location where her body was found, investigators believe that the killer was someone familiar with the area. The investigators went back to Honey's to retrieve surveillance footage from the night Patty left the club. Unfortunately, the footage was blank from beginning to end, which made the club owners look suspicious. It seemed the club owners were trying to hide something, but as much as the investigators wanted to handcuff them, there was no evidence tying them to the crime scene. Thought was that the club destroyed the video. Their position is that they don't cooperate with law enforcement. Soon after, investigators got a call from a patron, Leslie James, who claimed he had information on Patty. James said he was at Honey's from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. and had spent about 20 minutes chatting with Patty. After leaving Honey's, he drove to a casino 20 miles away, and on his way back later that night, he claimed he saw Patty trying to inflate her tire at a gas station. This was the same gas station with a malfunctioning pump. The police believed James' story at first, because they assumed that Patty had indeed visited the gas station. But James kept changing his story every time the police talked to him, making confusing and suspicious statements. The police put him on top of the suspect list and interrogated him thoroughly. However, there was no evidence to link James to the murder, so the police let him go. As the investigation stalled and police struggled to find a way forward, Nancy forged her own path. She contacted Scott North, a reporter for the Daily Herald, to keep Patty's story alive in the press. Scott published touching articles about Patty that eventually generated a good lead. A new witness connected the police about something he had seen the night Patty disappeared. The witness recounted seeing a man washing off bloodstains at the car wash where Patty's car had been found. He said he remembered the date vividly. It was his sister's birthday, but he never reported the incident, assuming it was animal blood on the car. The witness was asked to describe the man he saw at the car wash, and a composite sketch of the suspect was created. The police released the sketch to the public, with hopes for a breakthrough, but no one came forward to identify the man. The case soon went cold after this, much to the disappointment of Patty's family. Months turned into years, and almost a decade later in February 2005, the case was reopened by Snohomish County cold case detectives Jim Scharf and David Heitzman. By that time, forensic technology had advanced enough to make something out of the evidence gathered in Patty's car. Investigators believed that the suspect attacked Patty at the car wash. They decided to focus on the steering wheel and set it to the Washington State Crime Lab for analysis. Most of the DNA on the wheel was Patty's, but one ray of hope shone through. Also present on the steering wheel was the DNA of an unidentified male. The newly extracted DNA profile was submitted, the Combined DNA Index System, and in 2008 it provided the long-awaited answer. Investigators zeroed in on a match with a known offender who was already in custody serving time. A repeat offender named Danny Giles. 40-year-old Danny Giles had a long list of offenses on police record, but his DNA was only recently submitted to COITUS after a conviction for indecent exposure. He was a registered molester who was convicted of attempted abuse. His entire adult life had been spent going in and out of prison, starting with an abuse conviction in 1987. Throughout Giles' time in jail, he refused to be managed by psychologists and never participated in any treatment. He was described as psychopathic and posed a threat to women. According to Giles' ex-fiancée, he derived pleasure in threatening her with a knife. One of Giles' cellmates revealed that Giles admired the serial killer Gary Ridgway, popularly known by the moniker Green River Killer, for the number of lives he had claimed. But even the DNA evidence and Giles' criminal history were insufficient to charge him for Patty's murder. The DNA evidence only confirmed that Giles had been present in Patty's car, not that he had taken her life. The investigators started to piece the puzzle together and build a case against Giles. They compared the composite sketch of the suspect to Giles and were astonished by the stark resemblance. They dug through records and discovered that Giles lived in the area where Patty's body had been dumped and was working for a local landscaping company at the time she was killed. But even with all this, they needed Giles to either confess to the crime or deny he was in Patty's car. Detective Jim Sharp researched Giles before meeting with him at the prison. He approached him as if seeking his help on Patty Berry's case. since Giles had lived and worked in the area. Giles said he had heard about Patty's death on TV, but didn't know anything else. He also denied ever being inside Patty's car, and said he was unfamiliar with the area where the body was found. It was clear that Giles was telling lies. Detective Sharp knew that Giles would routinely visit the woods near Everett Mall to dump grass clippings from his landscaping workplace, the same woods where Patty's body had been found. To make Giles confess, Sharp showed him the DNA evidence that proved he was present in Patty's car. Despite being concerned, Giles staunchly refused to confess to the murder. But the detectives now had enough evidence to charge Giles with Patty's murder, so they did not waste time trying to get a confession. Since reopening Patty's cold case, the investigators had suspected that Tracy's disappearance and Patty's murder were linked. Both were young women who disappeared just months apart along Highway 99 late at night. In both cases, their car had been found abandoned, with clear signs that someone had attempted to clean away all traces and fingerprints. While Tracy's body was never found, investigators were certain she too had lost her life to Giles. The investigators again took advantage of advanced forensic technology to crack Tracy's case. They sent a single drop of blood found on Tracy's car window for analysis and were able to extract DNA from it. This DNA also matched Giles' blood, proving that he had been present in Tracy's car as well. However, just as in Patty's case, Giles refused to confess or share any details about what happened to Tracy, but the detectives went ahead and charged him for Tracy's murder. On November 14, 2012, Giles was charged with the murder of Patty Berry and put to trial in Snohomish County Superior Court. After years of pain and loss, Patty's family could finally hope to get justice. Giles was also charged with Tracy's murder, but the prosecutors faced the problem of convicting him without having found Tracy's body. Because of that, Tracy's case was dropped and Patty's case was pursued. After days of hearings, Snohomish County Superior Court, Judge Bruce Weiss found Giles guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to 47.5 years in prison. The sentencing brought great relief to Patty's family, especially her daughter, Jessica, who was then in her 20s. She said Giles was the reason she did not get to know her mother and demanded that he be taken away. Tracy's family tried to persuade Giles to divulge the location of Tracy's body, assuring him they had no interest in having him serve more time in jail. They only wanted to give their daughter a befitting burial. However, Giles remained silent all these years. Detective Sharp worked with a psychic in Tracy's case, who said Tracy was dead and her body was dumped in a shaft somewhere. Detective Sharp believed her body was somewhere near the area where her car was found, but the exact location continued to evade the police. The sentencing of Danny Giles brought relief to Patty's family and also gave hope to Tracy's family that maybe one day they would have the opportunity to give Tracy a befitting burial. The story of Danny Giles only shows how certain offenders should not be carelessly released into society. Giles murdered Tracy and Patty during an 8-month period when he was on the run from authorities for second-degree theft. What do you think should be done to offenders like Giles? How best do you think they should be handled so they do not pose a threat to society? On December 18, 2018, partially buried skeletal human remains were discovered in a field near Ville Platte, Louisiana. The remains were located near an isolated, rarely used barn in the middle of a field. The discovery occurred while searchers were out looking for a missing 9-year-old boy named Bryson Tabado. Bryson was later found alive 12 days later, hiding at a neighbor's house, and his parents were arrested for cruelty to juveniles, and he and his sister were removed from the home. Forensic investigators determined the remains to be that of a mixed Cajun French and African-American female, 25 to 35 years old, and had been partially buried for up to 10 years. Unable to match her to any missing persons reports, she became known as Evangeline Parrish Jane Doe 2018. After a painstaking DNA extraction by the DNA Doe Project, they were able to place a profile in GEDmatch nearly a year after her discovery. Through a collaborative effort, the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab, the LSU Forensic Anthropology and Computer Enhancement Services Laboratory, and DNA Doe Project were able to identify the Jane Doe. On February 5, 2021, the Louisiana State Police announced that Evangeline Parrish Jane Doe 2018 had been identified as Erica Nicole Hunt. Erica was born July 10, 1995 to Shane and Isaac. She was described as lively, energetic, and always smiling, and had 2 sisters that she was very close to. She had a 2-year-old daughter named Brianna and lived in Opelousas, Louisiana, just 12 miles away from where she was found. She had plans to celebrate her upcoming 21st birthday a week after she disappeared. On July 3, 2016, 20-year-old Erica and her little girl attended a barbecue at her uncle's house for the holiday. The next day, Erica stopped by her sister's house and hung out for a bit. She borrowed a few dollars for cigarettes and then left. She didn't own her own vehicle and usually asked for a ride. But this time she didn't. So when she left, her family wasn't sure if she left on foot or if she was picked up by someone. But the next day, July 5th, she was not answering any calls or texts and had not picked up her daughter from her mother's house, which was very unusual for her. A day later, her family would report her missing. During the initial search for Erica, police got a tip that she had been seen on the July 4th, 2016 behind Billy Ray's Food and a local restaurant between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., and then another sighting a few blocks from there on Madison Street. But police told the media they weren't completely sure these sightings were credible. Erica's family immediately began making missing person flyers, and for years her family searched, but they never found any further traces of her. At this time, her death is being investigated as a homicide.